Hello, everyone. Welcome to our online female changemaker event. My name is Sonja Ament, and I'm the program manager for the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation in Germany. Today, we will discuss the state of women's rights and gender equality in Poland. And actually, it's not a coincidence that we scheduled this web talk for today, because today is a special day. It's the 30th anniversary of the German-Polish Neighbourhood Treaty. So on this background, we have prepared this online web talk about Poland for you, which is a part of our hashtag Female Changemaker series, in which we interview female changemakers across the world that are currently driving democratic change in their countries. In the course of several online talks, we have and will invite many of inspiring personalities that are interviewed by our moderator, Karoline Gil. And we really do hope that you will enjoy today's talk. And I will also later post a link to our next event about the US. Before I introduce today's speakers, let me mention also a few words about the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation, if some of you might participate in one of our events for the first time. Based on the principles of liberalism, the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation for Freedom offers political education in Germany and abroad. And with our events and publications, we help people to become actively involved in political matters. And on top of that, we also do support talented young students with scholarships. In 2007, For Freedom has been added to, and since then has become an established part of our foundation's name. So it's Friedrich-Naumann Foundation for Freedom. And as we all know, freedom is something a lot of people in places around the world still don't have. So this is what drives us to campaign for freedom and to take on the responsibility that comes with it. We have been doing this since founding our foundation in 1958, and our headquarters are based close to Berlin in Potsdam, Germany, and we maintain offices throughout Germany and in over 60 countries around the world. And now, it's a great honor for me to welcome our speakers for today. Marta Lempart, she is the initiator and organizer of the All Polish Women's Strikes, a grassroots nonpartisan movement spearheading the current mass protest against the near-total ban of abortions by the Polish Constitutional Court. Apart from fighting for women's rights, Marta Lempart is also advocating for equal rights for members of Poland's LGBT community and for people with disabilities. It's a great honor to have you here, Marta. Welcome. Next, Gyde Jensen. She was elected to the German Bundestag as the youngest female member in 2017, and she is also the chairwoman of the Committee on Human Rights and Humanitarian Aid and serves as the FDP Parliamentary Group spokesperson on human rights and humanitarian aid. Welcome. And for Karoline Gil, she has a degree in European relations and socioeconomic transformation, and for many years has initiated and moderated discussions with international experts. She will be interviewing our two guests today. But before we start, let me also explain one Zoom setting to you. You are all very welcome to ask your questions during this web talk. Please use the button on the lower end of your screen. It's called Q&A or F&A to pose questions, and we will try to tie in as many as possible. So now, I hope you'll enjoy this web talk. Karoline, let's start.
Sonja, thank you so much. You already did my work. Thank you for introducing our female change makers. I have to stress, very, very welcome from my side. My name is Karoline Gil, and I'm very happy to be the host of the series. Thank you, a big thank you this time, not only to Johanna Hastings and Antonia Isaruperti from the Naumann Foundation, and of course to you, Sonja, but also to Johanna Hans from the office of the Naumann Foundation. We meet already for the fourth time. The series Female Changemaker started on 8th of March this year, and we already have spoken to Veronika Tsepkalo from Belarus, with Olga Romanova from Russia, and also on the occasion of 10 years Arab Spring with Widat Bouchamoui from Tunisia. So we already had a closer look on these countries. And of course, as Sonia mentioned, we will continue during the whole year. And today we will focus on Poland, on the situation of women's rights in Poland. And we are very honored, Marta, that you're with us as the organizer, the forefront of the Polish women, I can say so, I think. And I'm very curious what you will tell us about how the situation looks now in Poland, what changed, what was your personal inspiration, of course, and by the way, how to become a change maker and how to be on the forefront of these kind of protests. So very welcome, and Gyde, very welcome also to you, and I'm happy that you're joining from the German Bundestag today from Berlin, also commenting from your point of view how your party has this closer look what's going on in Poland right now, and also about the German-Polish relations. Today, we already heard it's a quite important day, 30th anniversary of the German-Polish Treaty for Good Neighborhood. So perhaps we also can come back on that, how this point is influencing German-Polish relations. So we have now around 1 hour and 20 minutes. We are a smaller group, but I think because of the weather, so I'm happy to see you or to then reach from you via the chat function. We will take in your questions. If you have any, of course, please feel free to write in the Q&A or F&A mode, and then I will get them and ask to our dear panelists. What else to say? This event will be live streamed, and you can also watch it later on YouTube, as was the first link today on the Naumann's Foundation, the Foundation's YouTube channel. So you can also see this event later online. So let's start with our discussion. And my first question goes to you, Marta. Perhaps we start in the very beginning. You've been born in socialist Poland. And when you think back about which Poland you were dreaming as a young girl?
When I was a young girl, it was already the transformation time. So when I was a child, of course, the child doesn't reflect on how things should be. So we took certain things for as obvious. The fact that you didn't have the passport, that passport was the militia station, and that we couldn't travel, and that everyone had to struggle basically to get things. That I remember these socialist times as these great times that I didn't know anything else. I remember them as times where certain things were not spoken about. So we had some underground literature, we had some opposition materials at home. And even though I was a child, I know that these are the things that we don't talk about to anyone, to strangers, or that we don't watch public television. The same thing that we have now. So that's the thing that I remember. And when I was a young girl, we already were in the transformation time. So it was this full-blown capitalism with everyone making money and everything becoming out of the sudden this colorful, chaotic, of course. But yeah, that was the nice time to grow up. Still, I think, because it was the first 10 years of transformation. I was young. I was a young girl when it was then. And I think that's what made me get engaged into feminist issues, into any struggles so late, because I was this generation that knew the difference between socialism and the things that came afterward, and we were so happy about this new colorful world. We didn't see that it also means that people are left behind, that people are left without any help, that those who are stronger will survive, but the rest not. That people are not acknowledged, and that was this 19th century capitalism that we were so enthusiastic about. And that, I think that's the delay. That's why we have this delay in having being a civic society, being a society that actually gets engaged, that actually reacts, that gets engaged in politics. Because we only thought about creating the world for us and earning the money and buying an apartment and so on, so on. That's why we came so late, I think. And that's why the populist party won the elections, because they actually appealed to the people who were left behind. And before these elections, the major message from all the governments was, you have to be young and smart and successful. And if you're not, it's your own fault. And you just ruin the picture. So just get out of the picture. We don't need you here. So I went through all those stages, I would say, I think. That's why this generation, my generation, people around 40, is so engaged now, because we've seen it all. We've seen the socialist times, we've seen this transformation, horrible capitalist times. And now we see the outcome of what happens if you don't pay attention to other people, if you don't build civic society, if you just have institutions and banks and yeah, that's that. Yeah.
It seems that some of your dreams did not come true, but some perhaps about a civil society. I mean, in Poland, you have an active civil society, and it changed so much after the transformation. But let me just ask again, because you mentioned we see the outcome. So how you would sum up the outcome?
The outcome is that we are actually now starting to build a country that is based not only on these hardcore pillars of democracy, which is free elections and free media and judicial independence, but also on human rights and civic freedoms. We never, ever, during these last 30 years, treated human rights and civic freedoms as something essential to democracy. We knew that judicial independence is essential to democracy. We knew that free media are essential to democracy. We knew that free elections are essential to democracy, but we never as a nation considered human rights as essential to democracy. We never considered civic freedoms as essential to democracy. We lost it on the way. So this whole solidarity movement at some point lost it somewhere. And we see now what happens if you don't pay attention to that, if you don't think of people, if you don't pay attention to human rights, and you have no safety measures, you have no measures to protect human rights, actually, to protect civic freedoms, because we never thought of that as something that is an important issue. And that's the hard lesson we have now. We had to learn it fast. What happens if your freedoms are taken away? What happens if your rights are being taken away? Just like that.
Gyde, I want to bring you into our discussion and ask you as like also not only as an observer from Germany, but as a member of the German parliament. We heard a very hard critique from Marta. How do you comment on this current development in Poland?
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and excuse my voice because I got some flu from my daughter who took it home from kindergarten. I hope I can be understood and I don't have to cough too much. Actually, I was very honored to be invited to a panel because just a few weeks ago, Marta was one of the panelists within a committee in the Council of Europe, where I am one of the members, and she talked about the drastic abortion law in Poland, which is only, I think, one example of how, and maybe we'll talk about it later, how women's rights and perceived human rights are viewed in Poland, and what that has to do with democracy. I think Marta made that excellent point, that human rights is nothing that can only stand for itself, but needs to be explained over and over again, because people sometimes don't know what to think about when we talk about human rights, and that a functioning civil society can only function on the basis of human rights and the protection of human rights, which basically comes with democracy, the rule of law, the freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, all these things. And if a government or a civil society even isn't familiar with concepts of human rights, or doesn't know how to work with them, I think it's very, and Marta said that at the very beginning, that it's very easy for populist politicians to dig into this narrative and show that that complex issues, complex challenges, as they frame it, have easy answers and easy solutions, and that is not the case. And I think human rights is one of these examples that we always need to explain over and over again. So I can only try to relate, because I was born just a few months before the fall of the wall, and I basically only know the freedom of movement in Europe. I don't know how it is not to have a passport. I don't know what it means if a civil society is not open and free most of the time, let's say that. So we basically need experiences of people who, as Marta framed it, seen all kinds of stages of society, but also this knowledge about it, that it should never come back to this, and that you basically invited us here to talk about the situation in Poland at the anniversary of the German-Polish Neighbourhood Agreement, and I think is a good point just to take maybe a step back and take a look at it, what we can do together. And I think women's rights is a good example where we can see how women also have grown out of their maybe very traditional role that they've been subscribed to.
So I heard that we have to explain human rights even in the European Union. Why we have to do this still? Why we have to explain human rights or women's rights, especially as you said, to a country which is a member of the European Union?
Well, if I look back at the 3.5, almost 4 years of our legislative term, and at the work of the Human Rights Committee, I feel that that's a very common thought of many people or generations growing into a country, trying to learn about the history of the country, always need also to have the possibility to ask about what is it about these human rights, what do they stand for, what does it mean, or what do they mean for me in my personal life. And human rights for a German student, for example, I have 3 younger sisters. If I would ask them, what do human rights mean to you, they would maybe come up with totally different things than 3 younger sisters in Bangladesh or in Russia or in Turkey or even in Poland. So we need to take the younger generations and explain to them and discuss with them what these concepts mean and how they basically shape their daily lives. And that means that they are able, or that they need to be able to go to a school, that they need to be able to stay safe, even, or not depending whether they live in a rural area or in a city, or whether they are boy, girl, or another gender identity. And I think the next generation is very much aware that there are human rights, and they know, most of the time they know what we're dealing with, but still this knowledge brings us to the point where we know what we're fighting for or what we're defending. And if we don't know the notion of human rights or any other concept, we don't know what we could be defending, if because we can't see certain movements of destruction. For example, during the COVID pandemic, we've seen many governments, even in the European Union, issuing certain initiatives in parliament that had nothing to do with the pandemic, and still basically in the shadow of the pandemic violated human rights, basic European principles that we agreed as member states. And that's something where society, every generation needs to be aware of and be outspoken about. And that's what happened in Poland. The government tried, even a few years back, tried to initiate a very drastic abortion law, and people took to the streets, and it didn't work for them, for the government for peace. And we've seen that again in autumn last year. And I think that maybe authorities or the political elites in Poland have underestimated this drive that women and also husbands and brothers and grandfathers took to the streets. And I think that's what this explanation of human rights is all about.
Gyde, thank you so much. You already answered my follow-up question. If you could briefly summarize what you're exactly criticizing, because you were quite engaged. I saw also on Facebook post where you were supporting the All Poland Women Strike Committee. So thank you for this longer statement. And Marta, perhaps can you bring us back a little bit also in the history of the strikes, of the protests in Poland, because some have seen and followed in Germany what happened last year, but I think not many know that it has a longer story, and also your activism did start long ago. So perhaps you can take us back into time when it all and how it all started.
So it started in 2016 with so-called black protests. That's the name that should resonate somehow. And I think this is what tells the most of the movement. I'm the person who called for the national strike to be held on 3rd of October 2016, when the ban on abortion, total ban on abortion, was being proceeded in the Polish parliament. And when you now read some academic books and some opinions, there's this whole wishful thinking of saying that these protests were for legal abortion, that these protests were because there was also a bill to legalize abortion. It was dropped in the parliament. That these were two ways, that was the legal abortion issue and the ban on abortion issue. And that is not true. And that's what a feminist establishment would like to see, people protesting back then for legal abortion. But it's just not true, it didn't happen. What happened was people went out to the streets because it was too much, and because this horrible ban on abortion, including jail for miscarriage, was hanging over our heads. Most people didn't even know about this bill to legalize abortion that was dropped. So that was not that anger. And I don't know the numbers, but huge amount of people who protested back in 2016 were people who wanted just to keep the status quo. So to keep the ban that we have, because we had the ban with 3 exceptions. One, when there was danger to woman's life or health. Second, when the pregnancy was a result of a crime, so rape or incest. And the third one just canceled when the fetus was irreparably damaged. And many people who went to the streets then were just people who wanted things to stay that way. And of course, it was different in big cities. It was different when there were big feminist organizations, but in small and middle-sized cities, and we protested in 150 cities. So it's easy to count that we had 9 big cities and the rest was small and middle-sized cities. We were people who went to the streets against this ban on abortion, this further restrictions. And more so, I think we were the generation that never had an opinion. I was the person who didn't have an opinion because we were not born in the ban, but we were raised in the ban. So when we were young, the ban was already there. So we lived in a world when everybody knows how much it costs. Everybody knows how to arrange an abortion. Everybody knows somebody that had an abortion, but still it's a taboo, it's a secret, it's something that is not provided by the state. And what happened in 2016, I think, was that we actually had to reflect on that at some point, that not only we're fighting against this further restrictions, but also the situation that we are now is really weird. And why should we pretend that it's not happening? And why should we pretend that that ban on abortion means no abortions? So when in 2016, support for legal abortion in Poland was 37%. Now it's 69. Now it's 69. So it's a huge difference. But it started with protests against the ban. And it's really important to say how it was for real, not to do this whole wishful thinking agenda. And there were many, many women in the movement. And that's why we succeeded. And that's why we could keep going where others failed already, because it's tougher and tougher now. It's that everyone was welcome. And we paid a lot of attention. I paid a lot of attention to people being able to grow into reflecting on the ban and on abortion rights. So people who would say, I am not for legal abortion, I'm just against this horrible ban, were welcome. And people who would say, I don't want to be called feminist, that were immediately attacked because how can you not call yourself a feminist? We created a safe space for everyone. And of course there were, especially with this whole calling, you have to call yourself feminist issue, there were these discussions. So, and I had to intervene, and we intervened a lot on that, because what was so important for me is that we would be a movement that doesn't have the checklist of things that you have to do or say and to look to be a member of the movement, to be an activist in the movement. And that's the difference, I think. That's why we are the massive movement, because there is no checklist and we don't have that, you're not good enough. And those persons who were protected from this, I don't know what was, this arrogance, I would say, of people attacking them, you have to call yourself feminist, you have to be for legal abortion, you have to read books, you have to know this and that, you have to use this language, you have to educate yourself. We oppose that very strongly. People attacking other people and telling them how they should behave and what they have to learn to be the proper person in the movement. And I think that's why it worked. That's why we are able to mobilize all the time. We mobilized every year. We mobilized against many issues and for many issues like judicial independence, also in democracy and so on. And the last big mobilization was in 2020 against the ban, again, against the so-called constitutional court ruling on abortion. Now we have 70% support. Polish Women's Strike is an organization that has 70% support. So it's double the government plus 10. And of course, double the opposition plus 20. And 28% of the government voters actually support Polish Women's Strike, which is huge. Almost 30% of the voters of the government actually support also the Polish Women's Strike as the movement that is inclusive, that is authentic, and that actually includes everyone. So I think that's the core thing, that we started with the fight, with the struggle against this ban on abortion, but we are now fighting for so many issues, and we're supporting everyone who's struggling with anything. So we support all the local... Can you
sum up it briefly for what else you're fighting for?
We support about 14 issues now. We're this national help desk for civic groups, not organizations, but civic groups. So when the young people are protesting against the so-called reform or education, we provide them with financial assistance, we provide them media coverage, we provide coordination. When people are protesting against the climate change, against the climate non-decision by the government, we also support them, and so on, so on. So we're collecting the money, we're coordinating, we're providing media coverage for every civic initiative that is there that concerns human rights and civic freedoms. That's what we are. Of course, it's mainly about women's rights, but still we provide assistance to everyone who's doing anything, like trade unions also, and the teachers who protest, and so on. So we became this help desk for people who want to organize and protest. So, and I think it worked last year, because we wouldn't be able to coordinate protests in 600 cities as it happened. We were 150 cities, and the rest was just civic initiatives, civic groups that had nothing to do with us in the beginning. They just got help from us, but they organized by themselves. That's how it happened. And now we're doing the same, and we'll be doing the same thing, because we know that people know what they are doing. They just provide, they just need some assistance. We don't want to tell them what to do. We see these initiatives grow and these protest movements appear, and that's good, I think.
So you, as I heard it now, so you perceive, or your organization, the Old Poland Women's Strike, perceive itself now more like as an opposition, as an organized opposition, but not being represented by a party.
No. Yes, we are the major opposition movement, the biggest in Poland now, and we're openly anti-government, obviously.
But still, the same party is ruling the country. Nothing changed. So please tell me, what are the other 30% of the population who did not support your claims, who did not protest?
I have no idea. I just know those who come with us. So I don't want to guess that, I don't know, maybe these people are very religious and they don't, and they believe in a state that won't be secular. They want a non-secular state or a church state. Maybe these are people who are just connected to the ruling party. I don't know. It's important who's with us. And some people will never be convinced that people should be free. Some people will never be convinced. Some people will just want to have control over others, so over women, over anyone who's not basically white male in a certain age. And we cannot work on that. We won't change that. We can provide people with assistance when they fight against these trends.
So Marta, I got already 2 questions, and I want to bring them and read them now because it's directly to you. Dear Marta, do you think that the broadening of your agenda is strengthening your role in Polish society, or do you run a risk of losing public support by not focusing on abortion and women's rights anymore? And then, but what is your role then? A facilitator that teaches other social movements how to promote their causes?
I think the brilliant thing about us is that we don't care. I don't care if we lose support, because of course there were voices that there are too many issues and we should concentrate on one thing. I can't imagine telling people what we were told for 30 years, that your issue has to wait, that your issue is not that important, that you have to shut up because this is not the subject now, that you have to step back, that you have to make place for more important things and more important issues. It happens to us all the time. So I wouldn't do that to anyone. So we have taxi drivers coming for support because they protest against some laws that are against them. And I won't tell them that, what I've heard so many times, that you have to leave your issue and you have to step back because we have more important fight to fight now. I wouldn't do that ever. And of course it comes with the price, but you cannot just do that to people. People were protesting about many things, especially last year. And we've seen the banners and we've seen the postulates and we've seen the chants and we've seen the slogans, and we've really analyzed that. And that's why we created this consultative council, the teams that work actually on those solutions and postulates and so on. And we hear these voices that these are too many issues and we shouldn't be doing that because it's too hard. And I'm saying that if someone can succeed in doing things this way, it's us. And because it's us that can succeed in doing this, we have the obligation to try. We have the obligation to try, at least. That's that.
So open door to anyone who want to be engaged. Gyde, how
except for the flat earth people and
men?
No, except for flat earth non-vaccine, of course, it's like we're with the science basically. So these are the neo-Nazi groups and and the anti-vaccine groups are not
welcome.
Yeah.
Gyde, how you support these movements, perhaps not only looking on Poland, but we have also other women rights organization and in other countries, and perhaps you can also compare what you're observing, what's now going on. So how you look at that and how you support in your function.
How we do support
most of the time. Oh, sorry.
Okay, I thought it was me, and I didn't understand the question. Okay.
Maybe Marta can say whether that makes sense, what I'm saying. Well, what I always what I'm a little bit surprised every time I meet with women activists from whatever country in the world, that there's already very much gratitude for just making time to talk. And I think the pandemic has shown how easy it is to connect to people, even online, even via Zoom or other channels, to just hear from people how the situation is on the ground. And sometimes it's just about raising awareness in other countries for the issues that are going on in Poland, in Belarus, in Russia, in Turkey. And every time I meet people, it is women that are engaged in civil society for whatever topic, and that's very, very, very differentiated regarding the countries. And but in these past, let's say, 4 years, I almost met with nothing but women who were fighting for something or protesting for something. Sometimes very much out on the open, sometimes in very much suppressed regimes such as Hong Kong or China, and still they have the main drive, let's say, and that is the concept of universal human rights, and that's what also I think is inspiring for me as a parliamentarian who is in the opposition at the moment. And I have every right that also my fellow MPs have who are serving in the government at the moment. And this is not the case in many countries in the world, that opposition politicians don't have to fear anything. And that's why sometimes you're getting back on the base of reality if you talk to people who just tell you about situations that are worse than in Germany, because sometimes I think even here we need more civil spaces, we need more time to discuss issues we want to discuss and take time for. And I think Marta is absolutely right. There are always people who tell you, in a pandemic especially, there are more important things than your topic at the moment. So just get along with it and do other stuff that is important for the economy, the economic situation, or for people who are afraid of losing their jobs. But everything is connected. And if a country has a good democratic basis and human rights are protected, then a civil society can thrive, then economics can thrive, and politics, opposition and government can thrive. And I think that should be the goal, and that's basically what I'm trying to do. And sometimes that is only in exclamation marks that is only listening and shedding some light in the German Bundestag on certain issues. And that is very easy for me, but a big step in other countries. So my job is very fulfilling on that level, that I don't take these things for granted anymore. And I have done that, I would say, 6 or 7 years ago, because I didn't know about many of these situations.
A question to you, Gyde, from the Q&A, the chat function. What can Germany and or the EU do to support women's rights movement in Poland and guarantee that the EU stays a community of values? Do you have hope for the new rule of law mechanism to better the situation?
That's an important question, and a very recent one, where we had some developments on the EU level. I have a very good a good friend in the European Parliament, in the Renew Europe caucus or fraction, Moritz Körner, and he is one of the initiators of the so-called the sue, or the threat of parliamentarians suing or wanting to sue the Commission because they have been too inactive to call for the rule of law and this mechanism with regard to the situation in Poland, also in Hungary, but Poland as one example. And this has never happened before, as I'm concerned. So currently, the European government has adopted this co-signatories that the Commission now is under review, whether Ms. von der Leyen and her colleagues have done their job in making sure that Poland follows the House rules. Let's call it that. And a thing that could change, and we proposed that several years ago already, is that the rule of law and or the existence of the rule of law in EU member countries, or the lack of it rather, should be directed or should be directly conditional to EU funding, because we cannot expect, or a government such as Poland or Hungary cannot expect to get EU funding even though they are not abiding by the rules of the EU. And that is one of our calls. And I think in the whole process of the next weeks or months, I don't know how long this review will take place, but in the upcoming months, I think we'll see how effective this rule of law mechanism actually is. I would hope that it is, because we as members of the European Union should not fund a backlash or a backdrop in the protection of women's rights in Poland, for example, or human rights if we if we are a little broader. So that's something we could do, and I hope that the Commission is following these steps as proposed in their statements. Just I think it was the beginning of this year, and even then, Hungary and Poland tried to get better deals from this rule of law mechanism. What I thought was very I'm missing the word. I think this is not the part or the time where you should try to make a better deal, because it's about the values that we share and not just a deal where you save money. And that's a little bit how Hungary.
Can you tell us more about the deals? Perhaps not everyone has followed the.
Well, I would describe it as deals. I wasn't part, or I wasn't present when they actually issued a joint agreement. But when in the process of this whole rule of law mechanism, we had always certain countries that countered that mechanism because they knew what could potentially happen to their EU funding funding money that they desperately need for projects whatsoever. So especially Hungary tried to deal that or tried to initiate that for legislation that had already been passed or had already been in the process of the parliament. This mechanism should not apply, but rather at the beginning of, I think, 2020. So this is not, that's what I was talking about. This shouldn't be the process of a deal, but rather a joint commitment to what is right, and that's the values that we share. And that was the deal when signing into the European Union. It's not just getting money and doing whatever you did before, but coming together under the umbrella of the rule of law, democracy, and human rights. And that's what maybe Poland and also Hungary misunderstood in the whole process. And that's why I think this initiative of certain parliamentarians in the European Parliament was a good sign also towards the inactiveness of the Commission.
Marta, which role international support, it may be, can be financial support also, which role it plays for your organization?
I don't understand the question.
The international support, maybe also from the European Union or Germany, or international support.
What do we need? What kind of support do we need?
This you can mention later, but which role it plays for your organization, for the All Poland Women's Strike?
It's everything, because we don't get any money in Poland from the government, but also we don't apply for the money from the local governments, from local authorities. So we are basically funded via grants from international organizations. This is just a small amount of our budget, and we're crowdfunding. So we're 80% of our budget is crowdfunding. We just started this collection, the international collection, for the psycho-emergency program, because we have this anti-burnout and anti-PTSD counseling program for activists and people who were harassed for the protests. The umbrellas program, the social program for people who lost their jobs and apartments and so on because of activism, and the legal assistance program, which is legal assistance for people who are being detained or people who are investigated, and so for the defense. And the last one is the legal assistance for the counter-strike. So for people who are subject to the smear campaigns by the public television and local outlets, because now the government took over also local media. So we started collecting the money internationally now for that. And this is very important because this is the assistance that keeps us going. I think if we were not a women's organization, we wouldn't do that because it means that you have to admit that you need psychological counseling and that you need assistance and all kinds of assistance. So I'm very proud of that because most of us now get that help that we need. So this is that. But the major thing is that there is still acknowledgement of Polish government is not Poland. And this resistance within the politicians against the populist temptation of making hashtag photos and saying sad stories about Polish women's sad fate. I grow when I hear about democracy. I'm happy when I hear about the rule of law, because these are things that bring us to the core, to the values that the European Union was built on, and to the tools that the European Commission should use, and they don't want to. They will do everything not to do anything, and we've seen that happening for the last 5 years, avoiding action against Polish government. And it's, of course, it's so easy for the European commentators and politicians to swipe into this populist adrenaline rush protests and women's rights issue, but it doesn't give us anything. Talking about democracy, talking about the tools, talking about the rule of law, talking about judicial independence, it's boring, I know, but it's the most important thing. This is the most important thing. We wouldn't have the ban on abortion if we had judicial independence. So it's up to people who talk about us in Europe to present that fully, because when it's just the talk about human rights, then the answer from the EU institutions is that they have no say in that. They have no say in abortion rights. They have no say in the reproductive rights. They have no say in this and that. In the rules of democracy, the values, and in the rule of law issue, European institutions have an obligation to act. So it kind of sounds like this counter thing because we should speak about women's rights, but it has to lead to something. It has to be constructive, and it has to show that there are things that should be happening and they are not happening because the political decision is not to basically leave us out in the cold. And I'm wondering often, why is it that? And this, I have this sad reflection that many European politicians don't consider us European. So we're still some people from some country in the East, and we're some people that you can lean over and help them and give them this helping hand. We're not European for them, but we are. And I'm really angry because I believe that every European politician is there to protect me and should stand for me, and their first duty is to me because I am European, not because I'm Polish, but because I'm European. That's that. And it's really sad to see that not everybody perceives that this way, but this is majorly that. And I think that's that, because we see so much attention being given to us, although we still have this every 20 years, every 30 years, we have to bring some catastrophe on us as a country, as a nation. And then we have to fight, and then we have this whole struggle, and then we have the martyrs and monuments, and people go to jail. And I'm like this third generation in my family that will end up in jail at some point. And yeah, that's that. So
like
I know it can be, yeah, that's the, yes, like we love to fight, I think, and we love to bring the like some catastrophes on us. And yeah, I know we should stop, and I know it's really frustrating to see us going up and down all the time. Yeah, but that's that. So I know it needs a lot of patience to see that.
There is a question from the Q&A chat that fits quite well into your answer. Do you think there is something German and other Western European feminists still fail to understand about feminist activism in Poland? So now it's about this solidarity.
I think with my experience with German feminists, I think there's not much to explain, because all the feminist organizations that I've met in Germany are people who really understand that we're just regular people. So we didn't feel this feminist establishment thing that we often feel, especially with international organizations. So it was really, with my German contacts, it was really easy for them to accept that we're just regular persons, that we have regular, no, we don't have jobs anymore, but we used to have regular jobs. At least we have regular professions, and we're not educated, and we might not speak properly, and so on, so on. So with all the civic contacts that we have in Germany, it's quite open, and it's really comfortable for me. It doesn't happen everywhere. And in countries where there is a strong feminist academic and media establishment, it's much harder. But it's not a national thing, I think. It's the establishment and the non-establishment thing. And it can happen anywhere, the checklist and the things that you have to do to be accepted. So, yeah, but I think seeing the massive movement, I think it should be obvious to everyone that if you see a massive movement, you have to realize that these are different people from different backgrounds with different levels of education, and that's that, and that we are, yeah, we're that. I always say that I start that with at some conferences, that I don't know which wave of feminism I am, and I don't care. And imagine the eyes. I like to do that because I think. Of course, I can educate, I can read more books, I can do many things, but I can also not do that. I can decide to watch Netflix until the day I die. I can read just crime novels. I don't have to do anything. I put my body on the line, I put my life on the line. I can stay the way I am, and that's that. I don't accept demands, and we don't accept demands And I think that's the time for some of the big establishment organizations to understand that we're just like that, and we don't have to change. We sacrifice enough. I'm on 76 trials for protesting, up to 8 years in jail. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's enough. But I think this is the problem with all the NGOs and all the civic movements and civic issues, that at some point some establishment is created, and there is this generational problem and looking up and down thing, and then the natural that's natural, I guess, that some people think that they are better than some other people, which is not true, obviously. Yeah.
There's a question about like concrete, about your work and about also financing tools from the chat. So what you're thinking about like public-private partnership and how it should be used in that case? Like if it's, I think it was about the question of financing your movement.
We are open to everything, especially to the things that will annoy our government, because we see that many organizations, we are actually a registered foundation for the last 2 years. And we see that many organizations are afraid of what the government will do for the Hungarian scenario, for the smear campaigns and so on. And we're big enough to face that. And we actually want to provoke them with something. So we're open to everything that would put them actually in motion, anything. So with the international financing and crowdfunding, and of course it's impossible in Poland, but it's possible everywhere. So we can have all the allies we want. We won't be discouraged in talking to anyone who can provide us with some help. And of course the government can use it against us, and let them try.
Just to understand better, can you tell me how much money on national level is raised via crowdfunding? Because if 70% support your movement, the number must be very high, let's say.
Yes, last year it was $1.5 million. So it's about 400,000 euros, I think. It's the crowdfunding.
And how many people are working in your committee?
Now it's 9 persons, but back then it was just 2 people.
And this money, like international funds and national crowdfunding money, you spending on organization of the protests and legal courses, perhaps you can tell us how the work looks like.
We spend a lot of time on equipment. So providing people with equipment to organize themselves, to organize protests, but also to do workshops and meetings and so on. We spend a lot of time, we support local groups, and we're talking now about 600 groups, not 150. So the money to rent the space, to do the printouts and banners and so on, so on. We also run programs. One is the anti-domestic violence program, because we're facing the counseling of the Istanbul Convention in Poland. So we started this program that is called Friends and Neighbors. So persons who are not specialists, not psychologists, not lawyers, but basically those people who are usually called when something bad is happening, like in the local neighborhoods and so on. The local leaders, we call them light bearers. So people who can provide this basic assistance, drive someone to the domestic violence center, convince someone to talk to the lawyer and so on, contact us when some money is needed and so on. So just regular persons that are usually the ones who actually provide assistance to the like friends and neighbors and people who are just locally the persons that are known in the local communities. And the second is the grant program for local groups who do workshops and trainings and so on. We also have legal assistance program. We have psycho-emergency. It's very important. It's a national helpline, actually, for people who experience burnout or for people who experience PTSD, because we had some police violence already. So people, and that was a change basically to what we had before. And that's the new situation for many persons. So we have that. And we have the social program for persons who just are suffering because of their engagement in the activism. So people who lost their jobs, people who have some economic problems, basically. Yeah, and thousands more. And we spend a lot of money on the co-initiatives. So we give a lot of money to other organizations, groups, and also provide them with legal assistance and so on, so on. So it's about 25% of our budget goes elsewhere to some other organizations and initiatives other than our core: abortion rights, anti-domestic violence, secular state. So 25%, about 25% go to initiatives that are within our scope, but are not the major issues in our organization. That's the percentage. And the grants are about 100,000 euros per year. Yeah, we're this big organization now, and it's really scary. And it's just started at my home, so yeah, that's that.
I will ask you about your personal motivation later, because Gyde has to leave us in 15 minutes. So I want to use the last 15 minutes you're with us to ask you about how to address this question, talking, because you're, of course, you in your position, you're supporting the women's rights, human rights in the committee. But like Marta, when Marta was talking about the Polish government, she drew a very black picture and black and white. But of course, some colors, it can be also gray, and you have to talk with the ruling party in Poland. So how to address this question, and what perhaps you can give us some more insights, Gyde.
How to talk to the ruling party in Poland?
It was to Gyde, because she
okay.
has to, probably.
Okay.
I haven't talked to the ruling party in Poland so far, but this basically, or most of the time, that takes place with on the government level. So the ruling parties in the German Bundestag, most of the time, government, they talk to the ruling party in other countries. We try to more engage with civil society movements, with activists, with opposition parties. That's how the past 4 years have been. Well, this is the work that we have been doing in the past years. But I would say that these anniversaries, for example, or opportunities that present themselves to us to raise issues, I would say whenever there is a time to address also aspects of dialogue that we might be seeing differently, I think it's important to still address them. And there are sometimes certain summits, certain big conventions where the majority only wants to talk about the common ground and things where they all agree on. And I think it's important to take every opportunity you get to also address certain aspects that could be better. And there is this process called UPR. It's called Universal Periodic Review within the Human Rights Council in Geneva. So it's not a European-based concept. However, we tried and we demanded that this process where countries could review the human rights situation of another country in a turnout of 3 to 5 years and make recommendations how certain challenges can be addressed. And that is the case for every country in the Human Rights Council. We could easily talk about a mechanism like this also on the European level, so that we have every other year or every 3 years or 4 years every member state in the European Union is under review. So also Germany, because Marta said it earlier, we don't want to differentiate between the good Europeans and the bad ones, or Europeans that are coming from Eastern countries that basically need to learn a little bit more how to be European. This is not what it's all about. It's about being on the same level and working for the same goals. And if Germany is under review, Poland is in the position to recommend to Germany what we could do better, and vice versa if Poland is under review. So I would say these opportunities that present themselves are very important, because an exchange of views always leads to the point that also German politicians or representatives get to know certain views on different areas, and how maybe also Polish government officials or opposition leaders or activists see politics in Germany or civil society in Germany. And I think Germany is already pretty good in accepting also recommendations from other countries, but we could ask for more and ask other countries to also address what we could do better in order for us to stay credible when we.
So what do we have to
Poland.
do better? This is very interesting, and from your point of view.
Well, depending on the government, I would say the current government could have been better in progressive civic political decisions, such as we have a paragraph in our law that's called the paragraph 219a. It's also dealing with the topic of abortion, and or in a very broad manner, and it's addressing the fact that a gynecologist, for example, cannot issue statements on their websites, for example, that they are performing abortions, for example. Just so it's a basic question on how can women get to know which doctors are performing abortions. And when you ask our current government, or especially the conservative part of our government, they would say there shouldn't be advertising mechanisms on these websites that show that abortions are being performed. In my opinion, that is very backward thinking, because a woman's right is also to have an abortion in certain set rules, of course, but to have an abortion if she has considered all the pros and cons. And I think every woman who has been in this situation has considered pros and cons. So that is just one example where I would say, think that we could have been more progressive in the past 4 years. When it comes to the prohibition of LGBT people, especially homosexuals, that are excluded from giving blood, for example. In Germany, if you're a homosexual person, you are not allowed to give blood unless you didn't have a sexual partner for the past, I think it's 12 months. How backwards thinking is this? And if we would be addressed by Poland, let's say, or maybe Poland is a bad example because peace would never address that topic, but by any other country, and would be in a position to justify these backwards thinking initiatives, maybe Germany would get a little more pressure from European partners. And I think that's what it's all about, because we should not be gathering in the group A, let's say, human rights are very much protected in Germany, and the group C, Hungary, where we all look in a very sad manner towards Budapest, for example. There are always certain developments that are pessimistic, but there are also developments that are optimistic. And I would say also in Hungary or in Poland, there are many optimistic developments that we could learn from. So that's my 2 cents about that. Sorry for
then
that
you
long
have to
answer.
give us an example from which positive movements we can learn.
Well, one of these positive developments is sitting in this conference, and she's called Marta Lempart, because this is and you maybe just one aspect where I would say you're definitely right. When we're talking about feminism in Germany, you see a lot of women who are very aggressive on this stance, and who would basically try to check you first whether you're allowed to call yourself a feminist. And I would say, if that happens, you're driving women or people away from this concept and from the discussion about this concept. And it basically just means what Marta said. I'm a human being, and I can do whatever I think is right for me and my body. And that's what feminism is all about. It's not just about reading books or attending any kind of class. This is, I think, the new part, or the more recent part in feminism. But the older concept behind it is just that women's rights are human rights, and they're the same as for any other human being with whatever genitals you can come up with. And I think sometimes this makes the conversation and the discussion about feminism so uneasy, especially in Germany. If we would have more people who would just say, well, I'm fighting for equality and I'm a feminist, I would expect people not to check you first and try to give you an exam to check whether you're worthy of that concept. And that's why I think we need more people like Marta who just do their thing and don't like to be asked these difficult questions that are maybe coming up in the future, but are not the reason why she just did what she did.
This was just almost perfect timing, because unfortunately you cannot stay until the end of our discussion, and you have to leave earlier. So thank you so much for joining, for your time to talk about women's rights in Poland. And of course, we also talked about Germany and the European level. So thank you so much for joining and your openness.
Thank you for the invitation.
So Marta, so now it's only 2 of us and 16 others.
Yeah.
Others, but we got some questions. We got some questions, and I want to use this last 15 minutes to talk about your personal motivation and also your role as female changemaker. And I start with the question from the audience: what do you think prepared you for a leadership role, and what were the key reasons for the success of your anti-abortion movement? So one question from the chat.
Okay, I think I've said what was the most important elements of the success. So this non-checklist thing, and we accept everyone thing, and that we're regular persons thing, and that we are the help desk, not the management board. So we have persons who organize exhibitions on women's rights to vote, and we have persons who basically throw eggs at the Prime Minister's car. And this is not my role to judge, because people know what they are doing, and the only thing is that it's within the scope of our postulates, and that is not violent, that we don't use violence. And people choose their ways of doing things and whatever they want to do. And it's very hard to accept, not only with those who have actually the money and the media attention and all the coordination tools, but it's also among us. And it took us a long time to learn that we don't control each other also. Because I had these interventions, that person from city A would call me and say, city B plans to do this and that, and this is a bad idea. We cannot allow this happen. You have to intervene. And there was this whole explanation process that I would have to convince the person that we're not in city B. We don't know how it's there. And the person who's doing that there gives their name and their face, and is an adult person usually. So we have to at least consider that the person knows what he or she is doing. But it was very hard to learn. We're post-Soviet society, so this need to control each other is very strong. And I don't believe in one method of doing things. I believe that we have those streams going the similar direction at least, and they don't have to be joined, and nobody can join these streams of initiatives by force or by, I don't know, establishing some boards and regional boards and local boards and all this control and monitoring system. I don't believe that. And we have statistics actually to prove that. We have data from 2016 to 2019, we had 1,500 events in over 100 cities in Poland, actions and events and so on. And we had to comment on something that went wrong actually twice. So of 1,500 events and actions, we had trouble twice. Just 2 cases when something went not the way that we would expect, not along the values of the organization. So imagine building the whole monitoring and control system to avoid those 2 cases in 1,500. This is ridiculous. This is absurd. And it just shows that people know what they are doing. And that's the thing, the trusting and being kind, that we don't have to agree. We don't even have to like each other because people are different, but we are doing things. And this is the core thing in the movement. I think that somebody has to do the job. Somebody has to do the things that are to be done. And that's the connection. And I think the success thing also lays in this, that we are, we realized the cycle thing quite soon, that we knew that there are protests, and then there are smaller protests, and then there are bigger protests, and that's the value of that we're the light bearers. So when something happens, people locally know where to turn to, where to look for information, and they know that something will be organized, and they know who to offer the help to also. So this is this sleeping thing. So now it can be frustrating, especially for new persons, that nothing is happening, as if you see, because there are no protests. But we know that when something blows off, I think it will be in September. That's one of the favorite months. We will be ready, and things will just go as usual. But the core thing is that we don't try to force things upon each other. And that's hard, because everybody knows everything the best, of course. Everybody has their own idea how to fight for freedom, basically. Yeah.
You said that someone has to do the job, and then it's you and of course your other colleagues, because you're not alone. But you have been targeted by government with arrests and legal charges. And also you're facing death threats from opponents of the protests. So where do you still get your motivation from?
It's hard to stop at some point, obviously. First, it started, I think, I'm the second generation fighter, of course, because my mother was also involved, not in women's rights issues, but with persons with disabilities issues. And she was actually the rebel who caused the major change in how the education of deaf children in Poland looks like. So no more special schools, no more boarding schools, just regular schools or integration classes, and so on, so on. So my mother was the actual cause for that. She was the person who caused that to happen. inciting the rebellion of the parents and the speech therapists against the special school system and this 19th century horrible system that would basically treat deaf, hearing impaired children as people who had no right to even plan their lives in any way, or to have any ambitions, or to choose their future, their jobs and schools and so on. So yeah, I have this experience like from home. And that's the thing, that everybody, if you ask anybody, everybody would say that the most important thing for me is freedom. It's not true, it's justice. Still. Freedom, of course, safety, of course, but justice is the most important thing. And when there is no justice, we should react. If something is not happening properly, we should always react to that, because it can happen to anyone. And that's what I have that from home. So if I was a person with disability, my mother would basically burn everything and everyone down if someone tried to put any obstacles in my life, in my future, and so on, so on. So to force her as a mother of a child to make decisions that wouldn't be good for me. So that's the same thing.
And looking back on your activism, and if you could restart all over again, you would do something else?
I don't know if I would do that at all. No, I think we learn from everything still. Maybe we would, and I would start, and we would start the assisted programs earlier. So we would admit and convince other people who are involved in activism, or it's not activism now, it's the freedom fight basically, to get help and assistance earlier, like a year earlier. We would be in a different place now. Now it's like this emergency.
You mean financial assistance?
No, the psychological counseling, the financial assistance, and legal assistance also with this, because we also have the national helpline now, and so on, so on. We would start the support programs for activists and leaders and participants also, because they are also being repressed earlier, and it would be much easier for everyone, especially if we were the ones who would give the example. If I were the one who would give the example that if you are feeling burnout, you should use counseling, it's nothing to be ashamed of, many things would happen better. So many people wouldn't have to get really difficult situations in their life. But we still had this, I think this is this post-macho thing, that we perceive ourselves, and I perceive myself as a strong person. So we had to go through this way. And now I wish it would happen faster, because it would be a lot of less of this emotional work that we are now doing as an organization. So that's that's major. So admitting that we need support and help and so on, because it's so exhausting, that we're exhausted, admitting that we're exhausted at some point. We admitted that we are exhausted just now, and we should have done that 2 years ago already, because it's nothing to be ashamed of with this type of work that we do.
And how you will continue? You said that in September it will be next hot month.
I hope so.
How you're looking on the next months, and do you expect then some real changes in Poland because of the support you're receiving?
We have the possibility of the elections looming over us, and there is a whole political crisis because of the email leak. It's not even a leak, it's just that our government is stupid and everybody can get access to their emails. So we don't know what will happen. I don't think the elections will be now in the autumn, but they might be in spring, the earlier elections. So we're facing this big decisions of what we are doing, because beside the mobilization capability, we are also a political force. And on one side, the politics is the worst and weirdest thing, but there is an expectation also, and we have to take everything into account. So we have to really listen to people who support us, what they expect us to do. And even if
so
we don't like some ideas,
you're open
we have to be open.
to create a new party?
I hate that idea, and I will be the major. This is the worst that could happen to me.
Why?
I was forced to do that because this is horrible, and we have this new parties appearing that within 3 months are the same marketing horrible products that don't change anything and they don't care about the people, and it happens to every new party that is there to change the politics into more open to the citizens and so on, and it never happens. So this is displaying the same tricks always, and nobody knows how to avoid that. Nobody knows how to form a party that won't be this horrible horrible place that women have no say at, because there is no political party in Poland where women would have any say. And it doesn't matter if it's a progressive, it's a conservative, it's just women have no say in politics in Poland. They are not leading the parties, they are not, yeah. So that would be a disaster for me personally. And I will do everything to avoid. But still, it's a disaster. It's a disaster to form a party and just end at some couple, some percentage and some members of parliament, and to go into the scheme of people who don't care about citizens. We don't have political culture. We don't have members of parliament that would openly say, for example, how they will vote on certain issues. We don't have that culture. They don't answer to journalists and don't answer to the citizens. It's the leader of the party usually goes to the press conference and he says that he doesn't know how they will vote. We don't know anything. And it's the same with the government and the opposition. Nobody feels obliged to actually talk to the citizens. Nobody feels even obliged to talk to the journalists. And I don't want to be the part of this system. And I can imagine how much enthusiasm people who form the new parties have. And I don't know what happens, that after 3 months, we see these marketing machines, these absurd conferences, these complete, totally losing contact with citizens and with the real life. I don't know how to prevent any new party from that. And nobody knows that, because if it was preventable, it would already happen. And it happens to all the new political parties that come up to the political scene to change the politics. That's hard. So we would first have to come up with an idea how to prevent that from happening. And nobody knows the answer, how to do that. That's the problem.
That's a harsh critique on the political system and political institution.
Yeah, in Poland, it's really, this is something that I've seen in the Argentinian parliament, because I was following their struggle for legal abortion, obviously. And actually, you can see at the, I think it was La Nación news portal, you could check every member of parliament how they will vote. If they denied an answer to the journalists, it would be absolute scandal. So you can check name by name by name during the proceedings in the parliament, how they declare how they will be voting on the issue. And we don't have anything like that. There's not even a chance that anybody would feel obliged to do that, to actually tell people what they are aiming to do and at least be open to what people have to say on that. No. So that's the problem. That's what we have to change.
Marta, I could talk with you for hours, but unfortunately, our time is coming to an end, and we already discussed 1.5 hours. So I think some of the participants, some of the audience, they want to enjoy the hot summer night. I don't know how it is in Poland right now, but I know that probably the summer is fully in progress. So my last question would, because we are talking with many women from all over the world, and how you would encourage a young woman today in Poland to follow your steps to get to be a female change maker?
If you're angry about something, come to us and we will help you get more people around that. So we will help you, and we will not want anything in return, because that's what we are for. They actually call us the aunties of the revolution. It was already in some report on the young, really young, 18 years old, some report on young people in Newsweek, and they actually were quoting me and saying that they know that I'm the aunt of the revolution, that they can get help from us, but they know that they have to do their own things on their own, because this is the job that needs to be done, and so on. So that was the quote, and that's that. If you have something, and if you think that you should do something, or you want to do something, we will help you with that, and no questions asked. Whatever you think is important and you want to shout it out somehow and somewhere, you can come to us, or you can find assistance with us.
But I also read an interview with you that summed it up that you're not all the time angry, because you mentioned that everyone who is angry should come to you, but that's not the case. That, as far as I understood, also from the interview, that you're not angry all the time.
No, but the feeling of things not being properly done, and the feeling of injustice, that it's not about me but about most people that I know, it's always there. It's always there, that things are not the way they should be. That's the thing. Yeah.
Marta, thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time, joining this discussion. The title was not The Aunt of the Revolution, but it was about women's rights under threat in Poland on this remarkable day, 30th anniversary of the German-Polish Neighbourhood Treaty. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for all the questions we received. Also, thank you to all of you who are watching, or who will be watching the video and of the discussion at the YouTube channel of the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation. And of course, you're cordially invited to join our next talk. Sonia mentioned it at the very beginning during the opening. It will be 29th of June, so already in almost 2 weeks. And we will focus on in the US, the Kamala Harris effect. And I'm very much looking forward to moderate the next discussion. And I hope to see you all soon. Thank you so much to Poland. Marta, to you, to Warsaw. Dziękujemy bardzo. Wspaniale. And so a very nice evening to all of you. And of course, great thanks to the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation for organizing this series, Female Changemaker. Thank you.